Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Cinema Tales. Today we are here with a beautiful French movie based on real story, in which a beautiful fashion designer wakes up to the reality of her country, which is under dictatorship and army rule. She, along with her lover, tries to save her country, and many incidents happens during the film. So without wasting time, let's begin. In the beginning of the film, we are introduced with Irene. She is a beautiful girl working for a fashion magazine. She lives in Chile. It is 1970s, and military imposed a permanent emergency over the state. Irene's home turned into an old age home by her mother, in order to survive after her husband died a few years ago. The state is suffering from different kinds of atrocities, but people keep fake smiles on their faces. Irene's mother, Beatrice, decided that she will only marry her daughter either with a government official or army officer. Then, Irene gets engaged to her own cousin Gustavo, who is an army officer. But something is off inside Irene. Next, we are introduced with Francisco, a photographer. He is here to meet a woman and listen to her story. She had been abducted by army personnel along with her husband. She had been touched and molested by many army men. Before they released her and her husband, Francisco is deeply hurt with the situation and completely against the army rule. Next day, he visits the same magazine office where Irene works. Both of them liked each other in the first meeting. Francisco's thinking matches with that of Irene's. After talking to him while having lunch, Irene decides to work with him. Next morning, he arrives at Irene's home. Her mother indirectly informs him that Irene is engaged to Gustavo. Irene and Francisco leaves the house and head off for their new assignment. They are going to document a miracle saint. As they reach the village, both of them discovers that there is no miracle saint. A woman tries to fool people with her illness, but all of a sudden army arrives and starts to inquire about what is going on. They misbehaves with Francisco and Irene, and take off the camera reel before leaving. Irene tells Francisco not to feel bad as they will document something else. Then she kisses his cheeks with love. Next morning, she takes him to Gustavo. She wanted them to be friends, but Gustavo is one of the army personnel, and Francisco knows his true colors. Gustavo shows his weird, frenetic behavior at the site, and Francisco couldn't take it. Irene's colleague likes Francisco and invites him for dinner. He agrees to meet him and talk whole night. Listening to his story, Francisco becomes emotional, as the army men uses emergency for their benefit and do whatever they feel like. Francisco reveals to him that he is not a photographer and not even a psychologist, but he works for Shadows. It means he is a part of a secret movement that is active against the army and dictatorship rule. Next morning, Irene comes to Francisco's home to meet his family and have dinner with them. They all are happy meeting her. Francisco's mother even asks him to marry her as she is so beautiful, but he reveals that she is engaged already. She comes to know that Francisco's family came here from Spain. They are not able to go back because of emergency, but they dream of getting back home. Next, we see Francisco visiting the lady again, who was tortured by the army men. He reveals to her that he is working secretly against the army. He requires all the information about those army men who tortured their family. She happily provides it to him. Here, Irene is also secretly questioning people who are tortured in camps. Irene was living a life of dream, and now she woke up to the reality. She understands which kind of place is this, and what kind of person is her fiancé. Both of them goes to find a missing girl, where Irene panics after seeing all the dead people who were tortured and killed by the army. As they go to Francisco's home, they find out his elder brother committed suicide. He was also tortured by the army men and lost the hope of returning back. She invites Francisco at her home for dinner and reveals to him that she is now face to face with reality. Next morning, they meet a boy who agreed to take him to a secret location where army personnel took him. Irene and Francisco wanted to photograph the location as they are collecting evidences. Francisco's brother works with human rights organization, and they are trying to fight the army in Chile. They find out a hidden mine where they put all the dead bodies of people who died during torture. Francisco captures every detail in his camera as a proof. They are depressed about the whole situation and knows that they both belong to each other. The only problem is Gustavo, who is engaged to Irene. But at night, they lose control and spend private moments together while expressing their love for each other. Francisco's brother is a father in church. He visits the Pope to tell him about the mine. Pope asked him to be careful as he knows they are being watched. Then the Pope secretly tells him to visit the mine and take a journalist. Next morning, the news spread about the mine and the dead bodies found. Irene informs her mother that she called Gustavo and she is never going to marry him. She tells Gustavo that she loves somebody else. He quietly gets out of her house. In the next scene, we see an ex-army officer. He didn't like what other army men did with people while he was in job. He documented most of the crimes in a diary and gives it to Irene. He also promised her that he will stand as a witness in court. As they walk out, somebody kills him on the spot and shoots Irene as well. She ends up in a hospital in life-threatening condition. Francisco and Irene's mother is depressed as the chances of her survival is very less. Gustavo comes to hospital and talks to Francisco. He says, "You are responsible." But he replies, "In reality, your people are responsible." Gustavo do not know the real truth about Army. Francisco tells him everything, and he realizes he had been working with criminals and he thought he is serving the nation. He goes inside and apologizes for everything. He comes out and shakes hands with Francisco before leaving. Army men are guarding the hospital as they do not want Irene to go away. Mike, along with Francisco's brother, visit Irene and give her a makeover. She becomes a pregnant wife and gets away easily. Francisco is planning to take her to Spain, but every checkpoint is guarded by Army. But Francisco planned to pretend as a newlywed husband and wife. Here we see Gustavo ordering soldiers to blast the mine, so that nobody can ever hide dead bodies in it. Irene and Francisco clears the checkpoint pretending to be a husband and wife going for honeymoon. As Gustavo shares pictures of atrocities with his fellow officers, guards come and captures them. Gustavo is being tortured as he realized the truth now. Also, he was engaged to Irene, who is now the enemy and a threat to Army. Francisco managed to book a spa for a week so that Irene can get better and come out of her illness before moving forward. After a week, they decide to move forward on horseback. They traveled via Himalayan mountains and appeared before authorities with all the evidences. People also raised their voice in thousands back in Chile. Also, Gustavo played a crucial role for restoring democracy in the country. In 1989, Chile became free, and Irene returned with Francisco to live happily. They first visit Gustavo's grave as he was killed by the Army men. This is the end of today's episode. I hope you enjoyed the movie. Please like, comment, and share the episode with your friends. I will see you soon. Take care.